Video contains violent content, details that are not suitable for common perception. Please consider before watching. Chapter 126, Shadow Clan 3. The name of the sharp-featured young man was Huan Yunmaong. Abandoned by his parents at a young age, he lived in the slums on the outskirts of the Heaven and Earth Society until he was taken in by the Shadow Master at the age of 10 due to a chance encounter. Oh ho ho. Not bad. You're the first kid to attempt pickpocketing me. The Shadow Master, impressed by his brazen boldness, took him in and personally taught him academics and martial arts. Although the opportunity was by chance, Huan Yunmaong's talent was unexpectedly outstanding. That was also why the Shadow Master took him in. However, Huan Yunmaong couldn't become an official disciple. The reason was castration. Yes, you have to be castrated to learn the sex ghost-in technique. Is it absolutely necessary? Young Huan Yunmaong, who didn't want to train in martial arts at the cost of cutting off his genitals, showed strong rejection. The Shadow Master didn't force him to be castrated. However, since he couldn't become an official disciple, he called him a quasi-disciple from then on. Although he couldn't become an official disciple due to not being castrated, the Shadow Master treated him just as well and gave him teachings. Therefore he had no major complaints. However, in the year Huan Yunmaong turned 16, he came to regret his choice. The reason was that although he didn't know when he was young if he couldn't become an official disciple, he couldn't become the Shadow Master's successor and learn his proper unique martial arts. Let me warn you in advance. If you get castrated, you lose a lot too. For example, you won't be a real man anymore and won't be able to have a family. Huan Yunmaong, who was an orphan, had a wish from a young age. Perhaps because he didn't know his parents and was abandoned, he wanted to have a family of his own blood. That's why he didn't choose castration. However, after learning that he couldn't become the Shadow Master's successor, he came to regret his childhood choice. Damn it. It would have been better to be castrated when he hadn't reached sexual maturity yet. Then he would have become the Shadow Master's successor. But it was already too late. It was difficult to discard all the internal energy he had cultivated so far, be castrated, and then learn the ghosting technique. Moreover, he had already reached sexual maturity. Having grown up wandering the back alleys, he had been frequenting brothels and red light districts since the young age of 14. No. I can't. That's why he couldn't get castrated even more. If he just got castrated, there were things to gain beyond what he would lose, but he just couldn't do it. It was such a simple principle, yet he couldn't do it. Troubled by these worries, he wandered for a while, and during those few years, 2 young junior disciples entered. Myung Tak and Yong Su. They were also orphans. Meeting them, he knew at a glance that they were children with talent no less than his own. However, to Huan Yunmaong, they were definitely not lovely junior disciples. These bastards might surpass me at any time. Rather, they were competitors. If they got castrated and became the Shadow Master's official disciples, he might not even receive proper treatment anymore. No, that was a foregone conclusion. No. I can't let that happen. With his thoughts reaching this point, Huan Yunmaong fell into numerous worries. And after much deliberation, he came up with a plan. He treated the junior disciples better than anyone else and paid more attention to them than his teacher, the Shadow Master. In response to this kindness, the junior disciples also followed him well as their senior brother. Having gained their favor like this, Huan Yunmaong, out of the Shadow Master's sight, made them reach sexual maturity early and instilled fear of castration in them. His efforts soon bore fruit. When given the choice, castration. I can't do it. I can't do it either. The junior disciples gave up on castration with tears in their eyes. Since it was originally a choice, not forced, the Shadow Master respected their decision. If that is your choice, there's nothing I can do. With these words, he looked at Huan Yunmaong with somewhat bitter eyes. What was with those eyes? Could it be that he knew Huan Yunmaong had manipulated them? When his eyes met the Shadow Master's, Huan Yunmaong became extremely afraid that he might have noticed his scheme. He'll abandon me. He'll abandon me. He'll abandon me. However, contrary to his severe worries, the Shadow Master's attitude didn't change. He still treated him like a disciple. He even asked him to take good care of the junior disciples as their senior brother. It was needless worry. Fortunately. However, because of this, something occurred to Huan Yunmaong that he had never thought of before. What if no one gets castrated? Then what would happen? At first he just regretted not being able to get castrated. But when he thought differently, the answer lay elsewhere. If the Shadow Master never forced castration on the disciples he accepted until the end, he could make everyone refuse like the 2 junior disciples. If that happens, perhaps he would get a chance too. The Shadow Master, whom he had watched for a long time, was not someone who went back on his own words. Then it might be possible. If no official disciple emerged until the end, he could become the next Shadow Master. Having such ambition, Huan Yunmayong gained new motivation. He worked harder than before, and his martial arts also improved by leaps and bounds. And a few years later, "You're going to observe the Corpse Blood Valley closing ceremony?" "Yes. I have business at Corpse Blood Valley anyway, and I heard there's a good girl there, so I want to take a look." "A girl, you say? What was this about?" Could it be that he was giving up on castration and trying to accept a girl with innate Yin energy as a disciple from the beginning? At the Shadow Master's words, Huan Yunmayong felt uneasy for the first time in a long while. He was filled with confidence that he would become the successor, since the Shadow Master hadn't accepted a disciple for a long time. So he waited with an anxious heart. And, has Master returned? "Ah, young Master. The society leader arrived a little while ago." "I see. By any chance, did he come with that girl from Demon Fire Hall?" "Demon Fire Hall? I don't think so." "No. Yes. It seems he brought a male trainee." At those words, Huan Yunmayong's anxiety disappeared as if washed away. He had been worried that if a girl from Demon Fire Hall entered, his position might be shaken, but it seemed things had turned out well. But there seems to be a bit of a problem. "A problem?" "The trainee he brought seems to be a hostage from the righteous faction." "A hostage from the righteous faction? What was this about?" Corpse Blood Valley was a place of trials that only talents under the Heaven and Earth Society could enter. How could a hostage from the righteous faction enter such a place? To the puzzled Huan Yunmayong, Internal Director Cho Yomhun explained, "Young Master, please keep this to yourself. I heard that the clan leader personally sent 2 hostages he brought from the righteous faction to Corpse Blood Valley." "The clan leader did?" If that was the case, it would be difficult for anyone to directly express dissatisfaction. But why would the society leader send hostages from the righteous faction to such a place? No, that didn't matter. Why did Master bring such a troublemaker? Was he pleased enough to bear that level of risk? Righteous faction. Among the people of the Heaven and Earth Society, there was no one who liked those from the righteous faction. No, just hearing about them made everyone hate them. Huan Yunmayong was the same. This won't do. He should probably speak to Master and tell him to reconsider accepting the righteous faction hostage as a disciple. No matter how he thought about it, the risk was too great. Thus he asked the Internal Director and learned that the Shadow Master and the righteous faction hostage he had newly accepted had gone to the society leader's private indoor training room. So he headed there. However, when he went there, he found that the junior disciples had arrived before him. This can't be. How could this happen? But they were holding the warriors guarding the indoor training room and making a fuss about something. What were they making a fuss about? As he approached, "Senior brother, it's a big problem." "A big problem?" In response to that question, the youngest junior disciple, Yong-su, whose chin was particularly prominent, replied with an absurd expression. Master accepted the guy he brought from Corpse Blood Valley as an official disciple. At those words, Huan Yunmayong's expression hardened. What was this about? An official disciple? Could it be? Did that guy say he would be castrated? At Huan Yunmayong's question, the second junior disciple, Myongtak, shook his head and burst out in anger. That's not it. He said he wouldn't be castrated, but because he has an innate Yin constitution, Master said he would accept him as an official disciple. Innate Yin constitution? At those words, a sigh escaped Huan Yunmayong's mouth. What kind of bolt from the blue was this? He had been at ease because Master didn't bring a girl. Moreover, since he was a hostage from the righteous faction, he was about to suggest to Master that it would be better to send him away. But he accepted such a troublemaker as an official disciple? How? But that wasn't the end of it. The news that shocked him even more was, how could Master do this? Not only did he accept him as an official disciple without being castrated, but he even gifted him the evil commandment sword that senior brother risked his life to obtain. Nash. The moment he heard those words, Huan Yunmayong's face distorted like a demon. Normally, he would have maintained his dignity in front of the junior disciples, but he couldn't endure this at all. Despite the warrior's dissuasion, Huan Yunmayong entered the Shadow Master's private indoor training room. Bang! In the middle of the room stood a handsome boy reading a scroll. He seemed to be around the same age as the junior disciples. However, neither his age nor his outstanding appearance caught Huan Yunmayong's attention. Rather, his gaze immediately went to the evil commandment sword hanging from the waist of the boy. No, Mokjangan, the righteous faction hostage. Crunch. It was true. He had hoped it was false, but Master really gave the evil commandment sword to that bastard. He had believed that since he had risked his life to obtain it, Master would naturally bestow it upon him, the eldest disciple, once the demonic energy was controlled. Did that damn righteous faction hostage bastard steal his position and even his sword? That was his. I'll kill him. He had to get back everything that was his, even if he had to kill that bastard. You're a really interesting person. If you kill me, you can get back what's yours. What? At the voice ringing in his ears, Huan Yunmayong couldn't hide his bewilderment. Although he was angry, he didn't outwardly reveal his true feelings in front of the junior disciples. But how did he read his thoughts? As he wondered, Huan Yunmayong's eyes wavered. At some point, the youngest junior disciple, Yongsu, was holding his broken arm and suffering, and the second junior disciple, Myongtak, was looking at him with absurd eyes. Just what had happened? Why? Why was Myongtak looking at him with those eyes? In that fleeting moment of bewilderment, forgotten memories quickly flashed through his mind. Whoosh. I can't stand it anymore. Brothers, I'll take it back right now. The youngest junior disciple, Yongsu, who couldn't hold back his anger and rushed towards the righteous faction hostage. Contrary to the expectation that he would at least be able to compete to some degree since he was the weakest among them, he was suppressed in an instant and had his neck grabbed. You're risking your life at our first meeting. Kook. You were prepared for this, right? What? Crack. Without blinking an eye, the bastard broke Yongsu's right arm. Dark. How could this be? Seeing that, Huan Yunmayong judged that the bastard was no ordinary skilled martial artist. Even he couldn't subdue Yongsu, who was at the beginning of the peak realm, with just one move like that. Becoming cautious, he was contemplating what to do. You can't take your eyes off this sword. Do you want it? What are you talking about? If you can have it, try taking it. Swish. With those words, Mok Jaeyoung drew the evil commandment sword he was wearing and threw it. What the hell is this bastard? Catch. In a daze, he caught the sword's hilt as if snatching it, but from that moment he couldn't remember. Holding his forehead with his left hand, Huan Yunmayong staggered and muttered, What have I done? Mok Jaeyoung approached him and said, You mumbled your desires with your own mouth. What did I say? You said that if none of the junior disciples who enter get castrated, there will be no official disciples, so you will become the successor? What a cute idea. At Mok Jaeyoung's words, Huan Yunmayong's eyes widened as if they would tear. He said that with his own mouth? He was concerned about the eyes with which the second junior disciple, Myongtak, was looking at him, making it hard to say it was a lie. But then, drip. Kook. At that moment, Huan Yunmayong felt a sudden pain and looked at his right hand. The veins on the back of his hand holding the evil commandment sword were bulging and bursting, and black blood was flowing down. Then it was trying to spread to his entire arm. In a panic, Huan Yunmayong hurriedly tried to let go of the evil commandment sword. However, arg. As if the sword's hilt was connected to his palm, it wouldn't come off. Rather, it was even more painful. What the hell is this? Huan Yunmayong tried to somehow remove the evil commandment sword by raising his internal energy with his other hand. However, the more he did that, the stronger the pain became and he couldn't endure it. Uff. As he struggled, Mok Jaeyoung approached him and said, Shall I remove the sword for you? At those words, unable to bear the pain, Huan Yunmayong nodded his head frantically. Then Mok Jaeyoung said something out of the blue. You clearly asked me to remove it with your own mouth. What? Why was he saying this? At that moment, Huan Yunmayong saw Mok Jaeyoung's smile filled with malice. Could it be? In a panic, he hurriedly said something. Wait, hold on. Before he could even finish his words, A sharp blade brushed past and sliced through Huan Yunmayong's right wrist that was holding the sword. Chapter 127, Shadow Clan 4. Inside a soundproof room within the secret special operations building of the Shadow Clan, the External Affairs Director pointed to a messenger pigeon with an encrypted message and spoke. Clan Master, it looks certain this time. The known appearance matches, and doesn't the Imperial Palace also want to completely uproot their origins? That's true. But the fact that he's being detained in the underground Golden Jade, one of the Imperial Palace, this has become quite a headache. The Shadow Clan Master stroked his chin as if perplexed. They had planted spies throughout the Central Plains to observe the unfolding situation, but to think that out of the many possible places, it would be the underground Golden Jade of the Imperial Palace. They had found him in the most troublesome location. What should we do? Shouldn't we report this to the society leader first? The Shadow Clan has its own reputation to uphold, and for a direct subordinate group of the society leader to find him first. No, not yet. But they keep urging. If this turns out to be misidentified information like last time or deliberately exposed information, it might displease the society leader instead. The Shadow Clan Master's concern lay in certainty. Based on the current information alone, there seemed to be a 70% possibility. However, to report and launch an operation, over 90% confidence was necessary. And even if it becomes certain, the means to immediately enter the underground Golden Jade of the Imperial Palace are far-fetched. The place with the strictest security after the inner palace where the Emperor, Empress Dowager and royal relatives resided was the underground Golden Jade. It was difficult for even long-term embedded spies in the Imperial Palace to enter this place. At the Shadow Clan Master's words, the External Affairs Director pondered and opened his mouth. Then what about trying to infiltrate a spy into the Embroidered Uniform Guard? The Embroidered Uniform Guard. Those guarding the underground Golden Jade of the Imperial Palace were the Embroidered Uniform Guard, a special operations organization. Unlike other Imperial Palace warriors, the Embroidered Uniform Guard had many masters skilled in martial arts. That was why infiltrating the underground Golden Jade was tricky. Didn't the Embroidered Uniform Guard request young disciples from the Righteous Alliance and our clan to send over when they announced reforms and reorganization more than a decade ago? Request. There had been such an incident. However, without the society leader's approval, that matter fell through. But now would be a considerably opportune time. And why was that? It was because the Imperial Palace was currently in disarray due to the Emperor's illness. As the Emperor's condition worsened, signs of internal strife emerged. According to the information, the Righteous Alliance dispatching disciples wasn't simply to form good ties with the government either. Are they trying to intervene in the next succession? Whoever becomes the Emperor influences the relationship between the government and the martial world. The Righteous Alliance was likely aiming to enthrone an emperor favorable to the Orthodox faction. Taking this into account, if the Heaven and Earth Society also intervenes through this opportunity. Knock knock. Right then someone rapped on the door. Clan Master. At the urgent-sounding voice, the Shadow Clan Master personally opened the door and went out. Not many had the authority to enter the clan's main hall. I apologize for the discourtesy during the meeting. The one who knocked was none other than one of the guards watching over the Clan Master's private indoor training room. What is it? I believe you should go to the indoor training room right away. Swish. A sharp aura grazed past the wrist. Along with it, something familiar fell to the floor. Thud. It was none other than Aarg. My arm, my arm. Huan Yunmayong, the Shadow Clan Master's first junior disciple, screamed at the sight of his severed arm. He never thought Mok Jiongun would really cut off his arm. He wasn't the only one shocked by this scene. This crazy bastard. Myong Tak, the second junior disciple, also couldn't hide his consternation at Huan Yunmayong's severed arm. When the youngest Yongsu's arm was broken, he thought it was somewhat understandable. However, to a martial artist, the right arm was no different from one's life. What are you doing? Myong Tak shouted at Mok Jiongun. At this, Mok Jiongun tilted his head and spoke. What am I doing? I helped him let go of his sword, didn't I? Mok Jiongun answered with an expressionless face as if feeling no emotion at all. Seeing this, a chill ran down Myong Tak's spine. What the hell is this guy? While thinking that, Mok Jae-eun grabbed Hwang Yun-myong's severed arm, which was still writhing on the floor, and lifted it. It's quite fresh. Seeing it move like this even after being separated. Why you? Hwang Yun-myong, who had been holding his severed arm, gritted his teeth and glared at Mok Jae-eun. The pain of having one's arm cut off was an agony beyond words. But more distressing than that pain was the fact that his right arm as a martial artist had been severed. Tap tap tap. Hwang Yun-myong tapped the blood points above his severed arm to stop the bleeding. And the moment the pain subsided, "I'll kill you." Burning with vengeance, he tried to attack Mok Jae-eun, but swish. He couldn't move due to the blade of the evil commandment sword touching his neck. The aura emanating from the tip of the sword was enough to separate his head from his body at any moment. I couldn't see it. Even watching right in front of his eyes, the trajectory was lost to such a degree of swiftness that even his eyes couldn't follow. This guy wasn't someone he could do anything about even with an intact arm. Mok Jae-eun grinned and said, "You want to lose your head too? Just what are you? How can a mere hostage of the righteous faction be this strong?" He knew that those who passed through the Corpse Blood Valley's gates were far stronger and superior to their peers. But he was a disciple of a direct executive of the Heaven and Earth Society, not just a subordinate clan. So how could this be? Grind. His wounded pride made him so furious. With that, Hwang Yun-myong gnashed his teeth and spoke as if vowing revenge. Ha. Enjoy it while you can. Although I've lost my right arm. Thwack. Ugh. The moment he tried to say something, Mok Jae-eun kicked Hwang Yun-myong's chin. He kicked so hard that Hwang Yun-myong's teeth seemed to break as he kept spitting out blood. To the suffering Hwang Yun-myong, Mok Jae-eun spoke as if annoyed. "You're quite funny. Just keep your mouth shut like that." And Mok Jae-eun turned his head to Yong-soo, who was holding his broken arm, and Myong-tak, who was at a loss, and said, "Have you two grasped the situation now?" "What?" Listening to what this senior brother here has been babbling about, it seems that I, as a formal disciple, have a higher rank than you. Isn't that right? At his words, the expressions of the two hardened. They had been angry that he had bypassed their own senior brother and was given the evil commandment sword, wasn't castrated despite being a hostage of the righteous faction, and was accepted as a disciple, so they had tried to teach him a lesson. But strictly speaking, Mok Jae-eun was a formal disciple of the Shadow Clan master and ranked above them. However, admitting this fact that they didn't want to acknowledge out of submission to the guy's power was unforgivable to their pride. Yong-soo, who had been holding his broken arm, spoke to Mok Jae-eun while suppressing his anger. "Don't be ridiculous. You think we'll recognize a mere hostage from the righteous faction as a formal disciple? You should worry about yourself first. No matter what, you cut off our senior brother's arm, so do you think Master will just let this slide?" Swish. At that moment, Mok Jae-eun disappeared from Yong-soo's sight. What? Wondering where he had gone, Yong-soo suddenly felt someone's touch on his back. Tap. Flinch. The startled Yong-soo tried to shake off the hand that put an arm around his shoulder, but crack. Ugh. He couldn't move at all due to the crushing grip on his left shoulder. Mok Jae-eun had his arm around him and was gripping his left shoulder, causing so much pain that Yong-soo knelt down before he knew it. Thud. But it didn't end there. Crunch. The sound of something breaking came from his shoulder. On top of having his right elbow broken, Yong-soo's left shoulder blade shattered, causing him to grimace in pain and try to scream. Pover. Shoo. You're noisy. He couldn't scream because Mok Jae-eun covered his mouth. To the suffering Yong-soo, Mok Jae-eun grinned and said, "You all came rushing in going on about me being a hostage of the righteous faction and whatnot. Have you already forgotten telling me to hand over the sword? And your thinking is quite short-sighted. If I were master, I think he would say that punishing you for disrespecting a formal disciple was the right thing to do. Don't you agree?" Yong-soo couldn't refute Mok Jae-eun's words. In the heat of the moment, he had said he couldn't acknowledge it. But Mok Jae-eun was already a formal disciple accepted by their master. In contrast, they were junior disciples who had refused castration. Damn it. Until now, it had been foolish of them not to become formal disciples. To such Yong-soo, Mok Jae-eun said, Since we're practically fellow disciples, I was going to end it moderately, but now that it's come to this, should I just make you a cripple unable to use your limbs? It'd be fun. I'm curious how you'd live if I cut off all your arms and legs. Shudder. Mok Jae-eun spoke those chilling words while laughing as if it were nothing. At his words, Young-soo's face turned deathly pale. He might not know about others, but this bastard really seemed like he would do it. Right then. Thud. The second junior disciple, Myung-tak, knelt on one knee and politely clasped his hands. Since the master held the highest position, prostrating was not allowed, and this was no different from the etiquette shown to a senior brother. After kneeling like that, Myung-tak spoke in an earnest voice. Please forgive our rudeness. Senior brother. Seeing his senior brother's sudden change, Young-soo found it absurd even while suffering. However, after being beaten alongside Young-soo, Myung-tak was mentally broken. The thought of holding a grudge against Mok Jae-eun had long disappeared from his mind. He just desperately wanted to be forgiven. We were wrong, so please. At that moment, creak, thud, the closed iron door of the indoor training room opened, revealing the Shadow Clan master and the external affairs director. To them it was like saviors had appeared. Mok Jae-eun shrugged his shoulders and whispered, "You're lucky." With that he released his grip on Young-soo. The Shadow Clan master surveyed the scene inside with a furrowed brow. Oh dear. He had rushed over upon hearing that his 3 junior disciples had angrily entered the clan master's private indoor training room, worried that an incident might occur. Although all 3 he had personally taught had reached the peak realm, he had been concerned just in case, but the result was completely different from his expectation. To think they would be this outmatched even without learning the true essence techniques of this clan. Regardless of the circumstances, it was somewhat disappointing. But then something unexpected happened. Hwan Yun-myung, who had spotted the Shadow Clan master, crawled to him with one arm, clung to his legs and tearfully pleaded, "Master, I want to be castrated. Please castrate me." What? However, that wasn't all. Young-soo and Myung-tak also prostrated and pleaded in unison. "Master, please castrate us." Just what was going on? Chapter 128, Reunion 1. It was truly a bizarre coincidence. Among the junior disciples, the senior disciple Hwan Yun-myung, the second disciple Myung-tak, and the third disciple Young-soo had not the slightest desire for castration after awakening to sexual desire. However, the situation had changed. They all pleaded for castration. And for good reason. If they didn't become formal disciples through castration, they might have to suffer under that devilish bastard for the rest of their lives. "Master, please castrate us." Seeing their pleading, Mok Jae-eun clicked his tongue inwardly. Their ulterior motives were plain to see. Until now, they hadn't wanted to remove their genitals due to sexual desire. But now that he had appeared as a formal disciple, they felt their positions were threatened. They had tried to do something about it with force, but they were no match, so only one option remained for them. Becoming formal disciples through castration. Meaningless scheming. That's what he thought, but it might be the right choice for them. However, if they suddenly appeared in this state and asked to be castrated, would their request really be granted? He had doubts, but, "You won't regret it?" At the Shadow Clan master's question, all 3 hesitated for a moment. However, they soon glanced at Mok Jae-eun, conscious of him, then nodded and replied in unison. "We won't regret it." It wasn't a situation for regrets. Hwan Yun-myung felt that way even more so. Not only had he already revealed with his own mouth that the junior apprentice brothers had tried to prevent them from becoming formal disciples, but now that he had lost his right arm, who would accept him? Hwan Yun-myung looked at his master with desperate eyes. Then the Shadow Clan master covered his mouth and laughed as if pleased. "Oh ho ho. Good. Since you chose it yourselves, of course I should grant it." "Ah. Thank you." At his answer, the junior disciples all knocked their heads on the floor, expressing their gratitude. Mok Jae-eun, watching this scene, couldn't understand. They weren't special cases like him, and they had given up becoming formal disciples for their own desires. Yet why was he accepting them? While he was wondering, Hwan Yun-myung and Young-soo seemed to be smiling at him with relieved expressions. Why were they making such faces? The reason was simple. By getting castrated, their positions had now become equal. No, since they had entered the clan before Mok Jae-eun, the situation had reversed. As his senior brothers, he could no longer bully them. Jae-eun. Just then, the Shadow Clan master called out to Mok Jae-eun. "Yes. We can speak casually now, right?" "Yes." "Oh ho ho. You've gained 3 junior apprentice brothers as soon as you entered, so you're quite fortunate. As the senior brother, take good care of them. At the Shadow Clan Master's words, the faces of the 3 distorted in an instant. What kind of bolt from the blue was this? Why was that bastard Mok Jaeongun becoming their senior brother instead? Unable to hold back, Hwan Yunmayong asked. Master, how can the one who entered last become the senior brother? What nonsense are you spouting? Pardon. Jaeongun became a formal disciple the earliest, so isn't he rightfully your senior brother? At the Shadow Clan Master's words, Hwan Yunmayong scrunched his face as if he had bitten into dung. He thought that by becoming a formal disciple he would at least have a higher rank than that bastard, but this couldn't be happening. Just then, Myong Tak clasped his hands in greeting to Mok Jaeongun. Junior apprentice Myong Tak greets senior brother Mok Jaeongun. The quickest change in stance above all. Watching this, Hwan Yunmayong and Yongsu were dumbfounded. Of course, Myong Tak paid no heed to their gazes. In any case, the tide had turned. Even Master had appointed Mok Jaeongun as the senior brother without even hearing the circumstances of what had happened inside. What did that imply? This bastard is the next Shadow Clan Master. To survive now, the one he needed to impress was not Hwan Yunmayong, who had stabbed them in the back. After sending the injured Hwan Yunmayong, Yongsu, and Myong Tak to the medical hall of the inner clan and being left alone, the Shadow Clan Master looked at Mok Jaeongun and spoke. You're not asking anything. About what? Why, you're not asking about the circumstances of what happened inside. And things like why I put you, who entered last, forward as the senior brother. Since Master must have something in mind, does this disciple of yours need to impudently raise questions? At Mok Jaeongun's words, the corners of the Shadow Clan Master's mouth twitched. He had asked because Mok Jaeongun showed no hint of doubt, but to think he would give such a satisfactory answer. However, this wasn't the child's true heart. Based on observing him until the Corpse Blood Valley's discipleship ceremony, this child was a cunning type that was difficult to control. For such a child to cite discourtesy, oh ho ho, while it's an excellent answer as a disciple, there's no need to hide your true thoughts in front of me. Do you have nothing you want to say? At the Shadow Clan Master's question, Mok Jaeongun soon parted his lips. However, the question was different from what was expected. Even though you knew, was it out of affection that you accepted them as formal disciples? The Shadow Clan Master's eyes narrowed. Look at this child. He never thought he would ask in such a way. It seems there was more conversation inside than I thought. Judging by the way you're asking. Contrary to the Shadow Clan Master's guess, there had been no conversation. It was just that thanks to Hwan Yunmayong, captivated by the evil commandment sword's demonic energy, babbling about his desires, Mok Jaeongun had learned how their master-disciple relationship had been formed. If you can call that a conversation. Oh ho ho. If it's uncomfortable, you don't have to answer. That's not it. If I must answer, it could be out of affection. But apart from that, there are sometimes things you can overlook while knowing. Mok Jaeongun tilted his head. What did he mean by overlooking while knowing? From Mok Jaeongun's perspective, who valued reason, it made no sense at all. But one thing was certain. The Shadow Clan Master knew that all the disciples who came in due to Hwan Yunmayong did not get castrated. No, it would be stranger if he didn't know in the first place. He was none other than the leader of the Shadow Clan, which oversaw information. Giving up something for the sake of something else is not an easy thing. The Shadow Clan Master spoke while covering his mouth. Oh ho ho. You'll understand what I mean once you face more of life's hardships and are in a position to lead an organization. I'll keep that in mind. Anyhow, I apologize for causing this incident by not informing those children in advance. Not at all. They probably haven't memorized it properly yet, so I'll arrange lodgings for you today, so while resting, I've memorized it. What? If you're referring to the Ghost Een Technique's oral secrets, I've memorized them all. At Mok Jaeongun's words, the Shadow Clan Master looked at him as if asking if that was really true. That's because according to the report, the 3 had barged in here not long after he had gone to the discipleship ceremony. No matter how brilliant, it would be difficult to memorize the oral secrets in such a short time. However, attending to the source, under the scenery, reversing the clouds, reforming the world, reaching compliance, understanding the realm of martial merit. The Shadow Clan master's eyes sparkled at the ghost Een technique's oral secrets flowing from Mok Jaeongun's mouth. Having watched the last gate of Corpse Blood Valley, he was aware that Mok Jaeongun's talent was incomparably superior to ordinary people. But he didn't know he would be this outstanding. Was it to this extent? This exceeded expectations. He newly sympathized with the ancient sages, saying that one couldn't help but be moved when welcoming an excellent disciple. The more he knew this child, the more he truly regretted it. If only his background was under the Heaven and Earth Society, he would walk an even smoother path. It was unfortunate that he still needed to improve his perception, but he was worth nurturing as a future talent. Even if I want to hold back praise, it's hard to do so. Well done. Not at all. Oh ho ho. I'd like to proceed with the teachings right away if I could, but it seems difficult today as I haven't finished dealing with the earlier matter. I understand. I've informed the Internal Affairs Director, so he will guide you to your lodging. You probably haven't had a proper rest while going through the Corpse Blood Valley's gates, so rest well today. Yes. Then see you tomorrow. I apologize, but would it be alright for me to take a walk around this area? A walk? Yes. After being in the mountains for so long, I'd like to take a light stroll and look around. At those words, the Shadow Clan master's eyes sparkled faintly. However, without revealing it, he spoke as if it were nothing. You want to tour the inner city, I see. Yes. If it's okay. Oh ho ho. If that's the case, I'll assign someone to accompany you. At his words, Mok Jaeongun clicked his tongue inwardly. Although he had been accepted as a formal disciple and the Shadow Clan master's tone had become gentler and more familiar, he still hadn't lowered his guard against Mok Jaeongun at all. The fact that he was assigning someone when Mok Jaeongun said he would take a walk nearby showed that. It was annoying, but there was no choice. Thank you for your consideration. And so, Mok Jaeongun left the Shadow Clan's estate accompanied by an escort warrior assigned by the Shadow Clan master. Don't mind me and just walk around as you please, young master. Yes. Thank you for your consideration. In fact, it would have been more considerate not to follow. But there was no choice. Who? Mok Jaeongun let out a small exclamation as he looked around outside the estate. He had briefly looked around while coming here, but it was indeed vast. No, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it immense. The inner city itself is large. It seemed like it would take quite some time to look around the entire place. Rather, if he climbed the tallest building and surveyed the surroundings, he felt he could roughly grasp the entire geography of this place. However, that seemed difficult to do right away. The escort warrior was watching his every move. What did you come out for? It would be better to rest today, as that eunuch-like mortal said. Just then Chong Ryong's voice rang in his ears. In response, Mok Jaeongun shrugged his shoulders and replied through voice transmission. Because I felt it. Felt? What do you mean? I sense Go Chan's spiritual energy not far from here. What? You mean that spirit who had entered that assassin wench's body? Yes. The reason Mok Jaeongun had come out was none other than the guard Go Chan. Forming a bond meant not only the spirit could sense the owner's energy. Mok Jaeongun could also instinctively detect the location of his bound spirit. It's not far. He was located within a radius of about 100 jang. If the energy was very far away, it would be faint and difficult to notice, but being this close, he felt he could definitely tell where it was. Northwest. If he headed in that direction, he would likely meet him. Seems like that guy is impressive too. Well, as a bound spirit, it's natural for him to follow since he can't even run away. But the fact that he didn't come close. It seems he's maintaining the body he possessed. Huh. You mean he infiltrated this place while still possessing a body? Yes. That's how it appears for now. The body seemed quite useful, but it didn't seem to be at a level capable of sneaking into the inner city. He must unexpectedly have some skill. Since he was originally an assassin, he may have done so based on that experience. Well, in any case, the more cards we can use, the better. Since there's no risk of betrayal from a bound spirit. He agreed with Chong Ryong's words. That's why he was looking for the guard Go Chan. Seeing that he had followed well and infiltrated this place, his value seemed to have increased compared to before. And so, Mok Jaeongun headed towards the northwestern path of the inner city, accompanied by the Shadow Clan's escort warrior. It was when they had walked about 30 jang. A group of people could be seen walking from the opposite side. One of them particularly caught his eye. It was a youthful-looking man in his late 20s with curly hair and a radiant appearance. In Mok Jae-un's eyes, the man's surging energy was visible. Surprisingly, the magnitude of that energy was on a level comparable to Bright Blade King Sun Yun. Who is he? He was at a level where it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call him an executive. However, it was difficult to make an accurate judgment based on appearance alone. Just then, someone else entered Mok Jae-un's sight. Behind the curly-haired youth, there was a man who appeared to be in his early 30s, seemingly part of the group. He was holding a wine bottle in one hand and had his other arm wrapped around the waist of a young and alluring woman. Isn't that? Could it be that guy? At Chang Ryung's words, Mok Jae-un nodded slightly. The woman wearing flashy clothes with a neckline revealing her chest was none other than. It seems to be him. It was undoubtedly the guard Go Chan who had possessed Ha Chai Rin. But why was Go Chan acting like that? It seemed he had infiltrated the Heaven and Earth Society in a different way than expected. Damn it. Having also instantly recognized his master, Mok Jae-un, the guard Go Chan couldn't lift his face, feeling embarrassed. Chapter 129, Reunion 2. Not long ago, in the Crimson Orchid House located on the eastern outskirts of the outer city, the Crimson Orchid House was famous for its hard-to-obtain fine liquors and its exceptionally talented and beautiful courtesans. Within it there was a grand and luxurious guest room called Yearned Promise. As the name suggested, the Yearned Promise guest room was a place that received only distinguished guests. It was a place that entertained only those from renowned clans and clans within the Heaven and Earth Society or those of the great clan leader rank or higher. As such, the courtesans of the Crimson Orchid House all yearned to go to Yearned Promise and entertain the distinguished guests to form connections. Even if they couldn't become the primary consort, quite a few had entered as concubines through Yearned Promise. However, this time the competition was particularly fierce. It was because of a rumor that a guest of the clan leader rank from the Heaven and Earth Society had made a reservation after a long time. Phew. Go Chan, who had possessed Ha Chai Rin, had somehow managed to be included in the group of entertainers. Due to the competition with the other courtesans, he had wanted to change his approach. He had invested too much time to give up and leave now. Swish. Go Chan quietly waited for his turn. The most special time in Yearned Promise was when the courtesans would showcase their talents or arts one by one in front of the distinguished guest. Ding. Ding. Currently, a courtesan was dancing in front of the distinguished guest, fluttering her long sleeves to display her skills. In Go Chan's hand was a Jiamungo star. *T/N, a traditional Korean six-stringed zither. Since he had passed the audition by playing the Jiamungo when entering the Crimson Orchid House, he intended to do the same this time. However, the problem was that someone had already played the Jiamungo before him. Damn it. To be honest, the skills of the courtesan who had played the Jiamungo before him were a level above his own. After all, he was originally an assassin, not a musician. I can't miss this opportunity. He knew that the rank of clan leader was quite high within the Heaven and Earth Society. If he could gain access through such a person, he would be able to enter the inner region of the Heaven and Earth Society. However, not only Go Chan but the other courtesans were also desperate to catch the eye of this esteemed guest. What a fate to have to compete with courtesans in this. Oh, it was hard to call it fate. Having died and become a spirit, what fate was there to speak of? It was the pitiful destiny of a bound spirit. Just then a rough voice could be heard from inside. Next. As soon as the voice ended, the courtesan who had gone inside earlier came out with a disappointed expression. It seemed she had tried her best to seduce the guest but failed and was in a bad mood. However, this was already the sixth courtesan like this. Strange. Originally, even if it was the distinguished guest only Yearned Promise, they wouldn't call for additional courtesans beyond the set number. But there were 10 courtesans waiting, including himself. 16 courtesans were waiting for the distinguished guest. Thanks to that, he was able to be included in that number without issue. But just how high of a position must this person hold for the madam to put in so much effort? It's my turn. Just then a courtesan stepped forward. She appeared to be in her mid-20s and was the courtesan who had challenged Go Chan. As she was about to enter, the madam whispered something in her ear in a low voice. Go Chan observed this closely. The body he possessed, Ha Chai Rin, had learned the art of lip reading, so he could roughly guess the words just by the shape of the lips. He's the disciple of the 5 kings. The 5 kings. This is your last chance. At the madam's words, Go Chan's eyes widened. He knew they were paying special attention, but the person inside right now wasn't just of the clan leader rank but a disciple of the Five Kings, known as the high-ranking executives of the Heaven and Earth Society. Go Chan couldn't hide his inner surprise. The Five Kings. The Five Kings of the Heaven and Earth Society were masters recognized as the strongest, leaving aside political affairs and looking at the entire martial world. And one of their disciples is here? He wasn't sure if this would be all right. Will I be discovered with Ha Chai-Ren's concealment technique? The four great assassins, as their title suggested, possessed a concealment technique that allowed them to hide their energy. Of course, that concealment wasn't perfect, because it involved inserting needles into several acupuncture points to block the energy channels. Currently, Go Chan had lowered his energy to the level of a second rate using the concealment technique. If he completely blocked the energy channels, it would be difficult to react when a dangerous situation occurred. This is troublesome. Even the rank of clan leader was high, but if he got entangled with a disciple of the Five Kings he might lose this body. While he was worrying like that, Tisk, the courtesan who had gone in earlier, came out with a puffed-up face. It seemed she was told to leave right away, even though she hadn't been inside for long. He likes young girls, doesn't he? It seemed she was kicked out immediately because of her age. The madam looked at her with pity and then gestured to Go Chan. It was already his turn. Don't upset his mood too much, and if he seems displeased, come out right away. I will. It seemed too late to change the plan. With a slightly nervous expression, Go Chan entered the yearned promise, the distinguished guest room. Inside, a somewhat rough-looking man in his early 30s with short facial hair was sitting in a relaxed posture, drinking from a bottle. Gulp, gulp. The manly-looking man put down the empty bottle on the table and looked at Go Chan. His gaze swept over him from top to bottom. For a moment, Go Chan felt goosebumps all over his body. The way he was assessing his entire body as if appraising him made Go Chan almost blurt out a curse without realizing it. Damn it. It's disgusting. Soon, the corners of the man's mouth could be seen slightly twitching. It seemed he was pleased with Go Chan's appearance. The man opened his mouth. Your face is quite pretty. Show me the talent you possess. Ugh. Go Chan barely suppressed his inner thoughts and calmly replied. Yes, sir. Even speaking with his own mouth, the goosebumps wouldn't subside. But he had to endure it. To get to his master's side, he needed to enter the inner region of the Heaven and Earth Society. Ding. Go Chan sat on a chair and placed the pick on the strings of the jiamungo. Before he could even play properly, the man raised one eyebrow and then waved his hand, signaling him to put it away. What's with this bastard? For a young man, he was unexpectedly picky, unlike his hearty appearance. He seemed to be the owner of a personality that was fussy about many things, unlike his open and generous appearance. Just then, the madam came out knocking on a bamboo cane and said, I apologize. Prepare the next girl right away. No. Stay outside. Pardon. I want to see something else in this girl. I understand. The puzzled madam went back inside the waiting room. He had tried to showcase his musical talent, but the man who had refused it was now telling him to stay, saying he wanted to see something else. While thinking that, the man spoke. Oh, I see you have learned martial arts. So that's what it was. As expected of a disciple of the Five Kings, he immediately noticed that Go Chan had learned martial arts. Since he had deliberately blocked his energy channels to reveal a second-rate level, he had expected a high-level expert to notice. However, Go Chan found it difficult to gauge this man's skill level. He could only surmise that he was at least a master of the peak realm. At his words, Go Chan recited the lines he had prepared in advance. It's just a small skill I learned from my late father. It's merely enough to protect myself from ruffians, so please don't think too highly of it. You learned it from your deceased father. My father was a low-ranking warrior within the association. Oh, is that so? The man showed interest in Go Chan's words. Within the Heaven and Earth Society, third-rate and second-rate martial artists were abundant, so it wasn't particularly surprising, but a courtesan learning martial arts seemed to be perceived differently. Even if he was low-ranking, for the child of a warrior of the great Heaven and Earth Society to live as a courtesan in such a place, it's truly a pitiful fate. It would be good to show a teary-eyed look here. but the situation itself was so uncomfortable that it was difficult for Go Chan to put on such an act. Just then the man chuckled and said, "Did you think I would comfort you like that? The world is full of people in hardship. Becoming a courtesan was your choice, so isn't it ridiculous to expect comfort? Your words are just, sir." There was no need to act unnecessarily. But then the man suddenly shrugged his shoulders and said, "But they say life brings a few strokes of luck. If your meager martial arts can pique my interest, I shall accept you as one of my people." "As one of your people? My so-called guards are all dull men, so it's been a bit lonely. Wouldn't it be pleasing to the eyes to have a pretty girl like you? Look at this. Not as a concubine but as a guard?" For a man with a rough way of speaking and who said he wouldn't offer comfort, he was showing generosity in a peculiar way. He didn't seem to be as narrow-minded as he had thought. Rather worked out well. He had been at a loss as to what to do if he entered as a concubine, but this might actually be better. However, he became curious about this fellow's identity. "Sir, before I demonstrate my skills, may I ask your esteemed name?" "My name? If you're saying you might accept a lowly servant like me, how can I not know your esteemed name?" At Go Chan's question, the man gulped down a bottle of liquor and said, "You mean me?" "Ah." Thud. The man, who had laughed heartily, picked up something that had been placed on the floor and lightly lifted it. It was none other than an axe. It wasn't the kind of axe used to chop firewood but a massive axe that could split a person in half with a single strike. Seeing this, someone among the 5 kings came to Go Chan's mind. Axe-destroying king, Ho Tae-gang. He was known as a supreme master who had slaughtered countless experts of the righteous faction with a single axe. And he was one of the 8 stars, regarded as the greatest masters of the martial world. Realizing who his master was, Go Chan unconsciously swallowed his saliva, and the man revealed his identity. "I am Ho Jong Hyok, the great clan leader of the Destruction Clan." "Damn it." Guard Go Chan, who had possessed Ha Chai Rin's body. Go Chan couldn't lift his face due to extreme embarrassment. By demonstrating his dagger-throwing skills, he had managed to become a guard of this man Ho Jong Hyok, the great clan leader of the Destruction Clan, who had come as a distinguished guest to the Crimson Orchid House. However, although his title was a guard, this fellow was treating him almost like a concubine. Not only did he make him wear clothes that revealed his chest, but he also had him pour drinks all day by his side. "This is driving me crazy." He had been going along with the fellow's tune, enduring it until he could find his master Mok Jung-un, but to think he would end up showing such an embarrassing sight. He wanted to immediately remove Ho Jong Hyok's arm that was wrapped around his waist. Keek. That fellow's soul is that of a man, isn't it? The way he's acting, he's completely become a wench. Chong Ryong laughed at Go Chan's appearance. Mok Jung-un also found it somewhat unexpected, but in fact he had no particular feelings about it. Rather, his gaze was drawn to the curly-haired youth with a radiant appearance and those around him. They were all exceptional experts, not ordinary people. Just then the escort warrior assigned by the Shadow Clan master hurriedly whispered, "Young master, you must quickly pay your respects." The one at the very front is young master Jang Nung AK, the second disciple of the society leader. Jang Nung AK? So that curly-haired man was one of the 3 disciples of the society leader, the leader of the Heaven and Earth Society, Jang Nung AK? He had heard from the Corpse Blood Valley master Lee Jiom. Aside from the senior disciple, young master Na Yul Riang, it would be difficult for me to describe the appearances of the second and third disciples as I haven't seen them. However, according to rumors, it would be best to be cautious if you meet the second young master. He remembered that his reputation wasn't very good. He had heard that he had a tyrannical temperament, wanting to obtain anything he desired. Just from his outward appearance, he didn't particularly seem that way. In any case, there was nothing good about clashing with this person right now, so Mok Jung-un clasped his hands in greeting and bowed his head to show respect. "Greetings to young master Jang Nung AK." As he greeted like that, there was no response. Rather, Jang Nung AK seemed to have no interest and tried to pass by Mok Jung-un and the escort warrior. Is that fortunate? It might be better for him not to be interested. However, it became a bit troublesome. It seemed difficult to take Go Chan away right away as he was with the entourage of Jang Nung AK, the second disciple of the society leader. So he was about to ask through voice transmission who the person with him was. But, tap. At that moment Jang Nungake, who had passed by, stopped. Then turning his head he said, "You just now. I don't think I've seen you before. Who are you?" He had hoped he would pass by, but he stopped and asked. Mok Jae-eun turned his body and replied while maintaining his posture of greeting with clasped hands. "I am Mok Jae-eun, disciple of the Shadow Clan Master." Shadow Clan Master? Yes. Is there a guy named Mok Jae-eun among the Shadow Clan Master's disciples? This is the first time I've heard of it. Under the Shadow Clan Master. Wait, young master, isn't this brat that guy? That guy? What are they talking about? At that moment of confusion. Swish. Suddenly, in Mok Jae-eun's lowered gaze, a pair of legs appeared in front of him. "Oh, so you're that guy." The owner of the voice was none other than Jang Nungi. Based on the vast energy emanating from him, Mok Jae-eun had estimated that he was quite strong, but his movement was extremely fast. He was already standing right in front of him. "You're the hostage of the righteous faction who passed the Corpse Blood Valley's gates with the highest score this time, aren't you?" At his question, Mok Jae-eun's eyes narrowed. Not much time had passed since the discipleship ceremony at Corpse Blood Valley had ended. Yet how did this person already know about him? While he was thinking that, tap, swish, Jang Nungake lifted Mok Jae-eun's chin with the folding fan he was holding in his hand. Then, smirking, he said, "I only feel like you're at the beginning of the peak realm, so how could a guy like you have gotten the highest score at the Corpse Blood Valley's gates?" What should he say in response here? While he was pondering, Chong Ryong's voice rang in his ears. "Lower your head as much as possible. This isn't the time to clash in terms of strength or influence." The opponent was the second disciple of the society leader. As he was aiming to be the next society leader, he held considerable influence here. If he carelessly displeased him, his ankles could be grabbed before he could even attempt anything. Naturally, Mok Jae-eun had that level of discretion. Thus, it was merely good luck. "Thank you for looking upon me favorably." Right at that moment, in the blink of an eye, Jang Nungake's index and middle fingers were poking Mok Jae-eun's eyes. In that fleeting moment, Mok Jae-eun made a judgment. A test. This was clearly a test. Jang Nungake considered his martial prowess to be around the early stage of peak realm, so he had doubts. Therefore he was now testing him to reveal his true skills. Here Mok Jae-eun's choice was simple. Ugh. Mok Jae-eun blinked and closed his eyes, only slightly flinching his body. Naturally, he wouldn't be able to dodge, and if he kept his eyes open, it would be considered strange, so he did his best to pretend to be an inferior martial artist. Thwack. In front of Mok Jae-eun, who had his eyes closed, Jang Nungake's two fingers stopped by a hair's breadth. Jang Nungi, who had stopped his fingers like that, chuckled. A woman in her early 20s with thick lips, wearing red clothes, who was one of his companions, also laughed and said, "It seems he doesn't live up to the rumors, young master." "It appears so." Jang Nungake also nodded as if he had a similar opinion and withdrew his hand. Fortunately, it seemed he had successfully deceived him. "Well done, mortal." Chong Ryong also thought that Mok Jae-eun had handled himself well this time. However, for someone flinching in surprise, his heartbeat is exceptionally calm, young master. "What?" Jang Nungake turned his head and looked at someone. There stood a middle-aged man with long hair, his eyes covered with a black cloth and leaning on a bamboo cane. He had the calmest energy among them. It felt like a clear lake, but could he possibly be a blind man? While he was thinking that, if my subordinate's ears are not mistaken, the person in front was not surprised at all, young master. "Not surprised at all, you say?" With those words, Jang Nungake turned his head and glared at Mok Jae-eun with sharp eyes. At this, Mok Jae-eun licked his lips slightly. He had tried his best to act, but it seemed the situation was becoming troublesome. Chapter 130 Ability 1. The second disciple Jang Nungake, one of the candidates for the next society leader. There were many conflicting opinions about his background, and many who took issue with his disposition and conduct. However, despite his overflowing greed, those who acknowledged Jang Nungake believed that his skill would once again establish the Heaven and Earth Society as a pillar of the Central Plains. Like the senior disciple Na Yulriang, Jang Nungake had built up quite a significant force. It was estimated that its size amounted to 30% within the Heaven and Earth Society. Among such a force, there were the next-generation powerhouses who formed the backbone, and Jang Nung-ak referred to these subordinates of his as follows. 5 Mountains Alliance. 5 enormous mountains. It literally meant his 5 cherished subordinates. Jang Nung-ak, who enjoyed ranking and ordering, regularly had his subordinates compete against each other to determine a new ranking and encourage competition. As a result, 5 powerhouses were determined, and they were the 5 Mountains Alliance. Excluding Jang Nung-ak, there were a total of 5 people present. Except for the female guard accompanying Ho Jong-hyuk, the great clan leader of the Destruction Clan, everyone from the 2nd mountain to the 5th mountain was gathered. Most people assumed that Ho Jong-hyuk, a disciple of axe-destroying King Ho Tae-gang, one of the 8 stars of the Central Plains and one of the 5 kings, would be either the 1st mountain or the 2nd mountain, but the reality was different. 2nd Mountain, Wisconsin Mengcheon. Despite being a blind man who had lost his sight, he was a powerhouse who contended for the position of the 1st mountain. And among the members of the 5 Mountains Alliance, he was the only one who was not from the Heaven and Earth Society but brought from outside, and he possessed an ability that everyone avoided as much as his martial prowess. It was his hypersenses that had developed after losing his sight. Among them, his hearing was by far the most exceptional. A useful talent. Jang Nung-ak highly valued Wai Mengcheon's auditory ability. That's because Wai Mengcheon could read other people's emotions or discern the truth from lies with this absurd level of hearing. Thump, thump, thump. It's steady. Wai Mengcheon had been carefully listening to this person's heartbeat since first seeing him. Normally, he wouldn't pay attention to everyone he didn't know. However, it started because of the guard beside him. Young master, you must quickly pay your respects. The one at the very front is young master Jang Nung-ak, the 2nd disciple of the society leader. From this conversation alone, Wai Mengcheon learned that one of the approaching individuals was meeting his lord, Jang Nung-ak, for the first time. Usually, when someone was referred to as a disciple of the society leader, their heartbeat would noticeably change due to emotional fluctuations during their first meeting, unless they were executives. However, it's too steady. There was not the slightest change in the heartbeat. It just kept beating, thump, thump, and it could be said to be too regular to this extent. Even when sleeping, if one had a restless dream, the heartbeat would change, so how could it be this steady? To this degree, it was almost at the level of a highly trained assassin. However, even an assassin's heartbeat would have variations. Who is he? In any case, he was also someone Wai Mengcheon was seeing for the first time. Since Wai Mengcheon was blind, he distinguished others through their footsteps, heartbeats, or habitual sounds they made. But this person was someone whose voice he was hearing for the very first time. He maintains his composure even after seeing the young master. His martial prowess, sensed through his energy, was around the beginning of the peak realm, which was unusual for someone who was at best a senior warrior or a great clan leader, considering his young age. And Wai Mengcheon realized that Mok Jae-eun was definitely extraordinary through Jang Nung-ak's test. Although he had lost his sight, he knew how precious eyes were to people. Therefore, when someone aimed for their eyes, he could confirm that most people's heartbeats would become incomparably larger than usual. However, thump, thump, thump. Just what is this guy? How could the sound be exactly the same as before? Judging from the sound of movement and reaction, it seemed like he flinched in surprise, but there was not the slightest change in his heartbeat. It was as calm as if he were doing daily activities. What is this? This was the first time he had encountered someone like this. Nothing represented emotions as well as the sound of the heart. But how could this be possible? After a moment of puzzlement, Wai Mengcheon could be certain of one thing. If my subordinate's ears are not mistaken, the person in front was not surprised at all, young master. Not surprised at all, you say? At Wai Mengcheon's words, Jang Nung-ak turned his head and glared at Mok Jae-eun with sharp eyes. He trusted Wai Mengcheon's judgment as he possessed excellent ability in reading others. Were you really not surprised? At his words, Mok Jae-eun waved his hands and said, "How could that be possible? My eyes were about to be poked, so how could someone not be surprised?" Tap. At that moment, Jang Nung-ak placed the head of his folding fan on Mok Jae-eun's chest. Although he didn't possess hypersenses like Wai Mengcheon, he could discern heartbeats through a medium without directly touching with his hands. Soon Jang Nung-ak snorted and opened his mouth. This guy is completely interesting. What? Don't tell me Mengcheon's words are true. The woman with thick lips and red clothes asked as if intrigued. Then Jang Nung-ik swept the folding fan up from the chest to Mok Jae-un's chin and said, "Is it because he has guts? Or is he hiding his skills?" Jang Nung-ik's eyes seemed to pierce through Mok Jae-un. Seeing his appearance, Mok Jae-un clicked his tongue inwardly. He thought he could deceive him with just facial expression management and appropriate acting, but that blind man seemed more troublesome than expected. It was his first time encountering someone who listened to heartbeats. "Mortal, stay calm. Even if his hearing is abnormally sharp, your true skills haven't been exposed." Chong Ryong spoke to Mok Jae-un. The situation was different from when they were in Corpse Blood Valley. If he made an enemy of the society leader's disciple, it could go beyond being annoying, and his chances of avenging his grudge might become remote before he could even attempt anything. This guy shouldn't act out rashly. Although he had been with him all this time, Mok Jae-un's actions were unpredictable. That's why she was concerned. In a situation where they weren't fully prepared, the answer was to suppress one's emotions. At that moment, Mok Jae-un opened his mouth. "I heard you are one of those closest to the society leader." At those words from Mok Jae-un, one of Jang Nung-ik's eyebrows slightly rose. It seemed he wasn't too displeased with what he had just said. Mok Jae-un continued, "The master who taught me said that one must remain calm even in front of a tiger to survive." At his words, the corners of Jang Nung-ik's mouth slightly curled up. Unlike his appearance, he seemed to be someone who knew how to speak eloquently. Referring to him as a tiger meant elevating him as an entity beyond one's capacity, and saying that he maintained composure to survive was lowering himself. In response, Jang Nung-ik said, "You seem quite capable in handling yourself. Even if I have guts, if the young master decides to, you can kill someone like me at any time, so how could I act recklessly? You're not foolish. Yes, those who know how to handle themselves tend to have longer lifespans." Zing. Mok Jae-un glanced at the folding fan touching below his neck. Although there was nothing sharp, the aura emanating from the point of contact seemed ready to pierce his neck at any moment. As expected of a disciple of the Heaven and Earth Society's leader, he was no ordinary person. "I will keep your words in mind." At Mok Jae-un's answer, Jang Nung-ik chuckled, removed the folding fan from his neck, clasped his hands behind his back and stepped away from Mok Jae-un. Could this quietly pass? While thinking that, Jang Nung-ik walked a few steps forward and said, "But you know, while it's good that you can handle yourself, if your skills don't back it up, you can't have this level of composure. Don't you agree, Mei Cheon?" "That's right, young master. This young master thinks that the hostage, you bastard, are hiding your skills as much as your composure. I don't know in what way or by what method though." At this, Mok Jae-un lowered his head and stance and said, "How could that be possible? I don't meet the level of your expectations." Someone who doesn't meet expectations wouldn't have gotten the highest score at the Corpse Blood Valley's gates for no reason. Don't you agree, Jong Hyok? Gulp, gulp. At that question, Ho Jong Hyok, the great clan leader of the Destruction Clan, downed the liquor from the bottle, wiped his lips with his sleeve and replied, "If you say he got the highest score with his current skills, it would be impossible unless he possessed heaven-bestowed luck or there was corruption within Corpse Blood Valley. This young master shares the same thought." Shing. At that moment, the blind Wai Mingcheon slightly pulled out his bamboo cane as if drawing it. Then a sharp blade hidden inside was revealed. "It's a matter that can be easily revealed if we test him. Young master, please leave it to me. I will verify it." At those words, the red-clothed woman with thick lips also stepped forward. "Ho ho, I will do it. I want to see if his skills match his handsome face." Seeing the two eager individuals, Jang Nung chuckled, shook his head, and then spoke to the muscular giant who had been silent all this time, with a rough beard reminiscent of Zhang Yida. "Geo Mo Pal." "Yes, my lord. I want to see this friend's true skills." "Yes, my lord." It was as soon as those words ended. Bam. The man who had been still no Geo Mo Pal suddenly moved. Possessing a swift movement that didn't match his giant stature, Geo Mo Pal instantly tried to strike down on Mok Jae-un's head with his interlocked hands. Swish. In response, Mok Jae-un utilized his footwork and spread his body backwards. Then Geo Mo Pal, with his arms lowered from the strike, charged forward like a wild boar. His momentum seemed like it would crush anything. However, despite this momentum, Mok Jae-eun maintained his composure and continued to widen the distance using his footwork. Tap tap tap. Humph. At this, Geo Mo stamped his foot on the ground, leaving a deep imprint, and extended his fist towards Mok Jae-eun, who was increasing the distance. Boom. At that moment, whoosh. A white light flickered from Geo Mo's fist, and an invisible heavy force rushed towards Mok Jae-eun's face. This was none other than Fist Wind. As the Fist Wind infused with chi flew towards him, Mok Jae-eun found it difficult to dodge, so he crossed his arms and immediately assumed a defensive stance. Whoosh. As the Fist Wind struck his crossed arms, Mok Jae-eun's body was pushed back about 6 steps. Tremble. Mok Jae-eun's eyes narrowed at his trembling arms. As he had somewhat guessed based on the energy Geo Mo was exhibiting, his martial prowess had indeed reached the pinnacle of the peak realm. However, in terms of the strength infused in his fists alone, it was even higher. It seemed he possessed external and internal energy that was nearly at the transcendent realm. This won't do. It seemed difficult to properly face this man with his concealed skills. However, if he fully revealed his skills, it would turn out as Jang Nung-ak wanted. No other choice. It would be better to take a few hits and dodge moderately. His pride wasn't particularly hurt by this. It was better to be hit a few times and avoid it than to get involved in troublesome matters right away. That was when it happened. Bam. Geo Mo's fist, which had instantly closed the distance, struck Mok Jae-eun's face, causing his head to turn sideways and collide with the ground. Bang. Phew. This hurts a bit. But this level of pain was nothing. Mok Jae-eun could endure even worse than this without letting out a single groan. At that moment, Geo Mo, who had driven Mok Jae-eun's head into the ground and turned him upside down, kicked his abdomen with a chi-infused kick. Thud. Whoosh. Mok Jae-eun, who was hit in the abdomen, was pushed back while arching his back like a shrimp. Seeing this, Ho Jong-hyuk, the great clan leader of the Destruction Clan, clicked his tongue. He's done for. Done for. When he saw Mok Jae-eun's footwork, he had guessed that he would be at the late-stage peak realm, but seeing him being helplessly beaten, he wondered if he wasn't even at that level. Geo Mo might be the lowest among the 5 mountains, but he was an expert with skills approaching the transcendent realm. When such a skilled person seriously unleashed his martial prowess, how could he be a match even if he was the top scorer at Corpse Blood Valley? Is this all he's capable of? Disappointment mixed in the eyes of Jang Nung-ak, the second disciple of the society leader. He had expected him to show as much as he had hoped for to some extent, but seeing him being pummeled like that, his expectations were gradually fading. Well, even if he had hidden his skills, it was virtually impossible for him to be a match for Geo Mo of the 5 mountains anyway. That's enough. Now. He was about to tell him to finish it moderately, but his heartbeat is still steady. What? Please leave it to me instead. Whoosh. With those words, someone leaped out. It was none other than Wai Mengcheon, the second mountain. Shing. Wai Mengcheon, who had drawn the sword hidden in his bamboo cane, instantly flew and slashed at the neck of Mok Jae-eun, who was being beaten by Geo Mo. He unleashed his killing intent to the maximum and showed the momentum to sever the neck in a single stroke. Swish. The moment the blade was about to touch the neck. Clang. Whoosh. At that instant, Geo Mo's eyes widened. Mok Jae-eun had lightly grasped the fist Geo Mo was throwing with his left hand and had somehow parried Wai Mengcheon's sword with a kick. You bastard. He was about to say that he was indeed hiding his skills, but Mok Jae-eun, as if Geo Mo wasn't even in his concern, looked at the blind Wai Mengcheon and said, I was letting myself get hit, yet you're making things difficult. What the hell are you saying? This damn rat bastard was arrogantly saying that he had been letting himself get hit by Geo Mo. At Mok Jae-eun's words, Geo Mo's anger surged, and he tried to shake off his grabbed fist and send Mok Jae-eun's face flying with his other fist. Hover. Crack. Ugh. Thud. At that moment, along with a groan of pain from Geo Mo's mouth, his grabbed right wrist was twisted backwards, and he was forced to kneel on one knee on the ground. Teach this bastard's energy technique? Geo Mo couldn't hide his shock. This bastard's energy technique was surpassing his own, which was close to the transcendent realm.